Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we are going to be reviewing the book The Earth, My Butt and Other Big Round Things by Carolyn Mackler. Now, if you have been around on my channel for quite a while, you may remember that I have actually reviewed this book before. I did want to re-review it because I did want to discuss some different things upon my second reading of it that I didn't necessarily address very well in my first video. So here we are. This book was originally published in 2003, so a bit of the technology featured in the book is a bit different than what we know today. So they actually republished the book and made an updated 2018 version where some of the technology is a little bit different. So pretty much like instead of emailing, they're texting and that kind of thing, just to like update it and keep it relevant for the current generation. I did read the updated 2018 version of the book. I have not read the original, so I cannot personally verify how different the two versions are, but we did get all of that information in the foreword of this book, so it's not like it's trying to seem like it didn't change anything or blah blah blah. Like they straight up tell you up front, like, yo, we updated it a little bit just so you're aware, because 2 years and years later after the first one was published, they did the author actually did publish a sequel. But that being said, this is my second read of this book. I read it the first time maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Before we get too far into discussing this book, I would like to mention a few trigger warnings that are involved in the book as well as will be discussed in my video. The trigger warnings do include hooking up in secret involving teens, talk about fat bodies, especially in a negative light, suicide mentions, eating disorders, self-harm, and rape. So if any of these are a bit too heavy for you, please have extreme discretion while reading the book or watching the rest of this review. As for a little bit about the book itself, our main character is Virginia, and Virginia is a 15-year-old girl who is considered to be fat by her family, her peers, and especially herself. The primary plot is driven like this and how she feels like a failure and like an outcast in her family and school who are full of like beautiful, skinny, perfect people. Driven by a self-proclaimed fat girl code of conduct, Virginia lets her insecurity and this code dictate every interaction in her life, whether it be with her family, her peers, her friends, and especially her interactions with Froggy, a boy that she is hooking up with in secret. And you did hear me correctly, his name is Froggy. Even if Virginia was content with herself, her constant negative remarks from people in her family and her peers drive her into some dangerous disordered eating habits, which are just praised and rewarded instead of treated as they are. And this is incredibly worrying in the book because, like, in the book, her mother is an adolescent psychiatrist who is just praising and rewarding these unhealthy eating habits, which is a whole thing to unpack. Things start looking up for Virginia socially, at least with Froggy, until she is met with the news that her brother has been suspended from college after being found guilty of date rape. Virginia takes this news incredibly hard as she struggles to comprehend the fact that her brother was capable of doing something so horrible, and she also now can't stand the idea of doing anything with a guy sexually, so she unexpectedly, like very coldly and harshly, without any explanation, cuts things off with Froggy. In an attempt to keep herself numb, Virginia gets put into a downward spiral. She's lost her boy toy, her grades are slipping, she starts to gain weight because she flips her disordered eating habits from restricting to binging. And it's just a whole mess. And it's not until Virginia decides to take a stand and make a few decisions about her own life that finally start to pull her out of her downward spiral and leaves her feeling more like herself than she has ever felt before. And it is only then that Virginia is able to start to mend her relationships, but most importantly, the one that she has with herself. In general, overall, I did like the book, but the first half, I will admit, is incredibly hard to get through, mainly because like it is so vividly self-deprecating and negative, and you know, there is description of disordered eating habits and self-harm, and it's just so dark to read that it was incredibly difficult to get through as somebody who has shared a lot of the ideas and opinions and feelings that are expressed in the book. So if you want to read this, I would definitely recommend reading it when you are in a more stable mental space, or if you're somebody who hasn't personally dealt with some of the issues that have been mentioned, because I do think it does a pretty decent job at educating the reader on the mindset that some people in these kinds of situations can have. And I do think it could be really powerful for people who haven't firsthand experienced some of these things to have a little bit more empathy and understanding of where certain people are coming from. And if you are somebody who has experienced some of these things, it's nice because the second half of the book is actually really fun to read, because the main character Virginia does start to come into her own and has a little bit of like a transformation, which is fun to read. And you can see the character development throughout the book, which is something that I personally really like, because I feel like a common theme in YA books is that the authors like really badly want to convince you that there was character development, but they don't ever show it. Whereas in this book, you can definitely see a difference in the main character and how she carries herself and how she interacts with other people and what she does. And you can even see little differences in the people that she interacts with and the other secondary characters of the book as well, which is something that I really enjoy reading and think helps pack an extra punch when making the point of the book. But again, I will have to say that the first half of the book is incredibly triggering and hard to get through, so no shade if you are not somebody who is able to, but the second half of the book is definitely actually fun to read if you get that far. But all of that being said, I did want to address one major issue that I did have with the book, and it was the fact that in reference to what Virginia's brother's character did, which I mentioned briefly in the summary, his character is convicted of date rape and is suspended from his college. And spoiler alert for some of the book, but it's like the story is told that he was like drunk, so he doesn't entirely remember, so he doesn't have any basis to like confirm or deny what happened, so he pretty much just like goes along with it because he's kind of like, yeah, I probably did, I was drunk, I don't know. And every time it's like the whole incident is referenced in the book, it's either referred to as the incident or the situation, which feels very dehumanizing. And that is part of like why it happens in the book, and like that's part of the point of why it's referred to like that in the book, is that like Virginia also feels like it's a bit dehumanizing. Like it kind of minimizes things and sweeps them under the rug instead of fully addressing them like they should be. But when the incident is actually finally referred to, it is almost always referred to specifically as date rape, which, how I read it and how I interpreted it, it felt like it was trying to make it seem less dramatic as just rape, which for anybody who doesn't know the difference between the definitions, literally, like obviously rape is unconsensual sexual assault, and date rape is the unconsensual sexual assault of somebody that you were on a date with or that you are currently seeing. So it is the same thing. It's just the only difference is like your relationship, or like the assaulter's relationship with the victim, is the only difference between the definitions. There is an overlap, like it is the same thing. And it did kind of feel like the book was trying to minimize it a little bit by emphasizing that it was date rape and not just rape, which I obviously had a huge issue with, because like I don't fucking care if you knew the person, like that is almost worse. Like it's not, and that's not to like compare experiences of anybody. I just feel like it in no way makes it any better, you know? So I did really take an issue with that and how that particular part of the storyline was handled in some cases. And I don't Like, I don't necessarily think that it was done with malicious intent, but I do think it felt like the author was a little too scared to just commit to saying rape. I don't know if that was the author's thing, if that was the editor's thing, because like obviously it is a book meant for young adults and that's an incredibly heavy topic to present to young adults. I do think it's very, very important for that type of topic to be addressed, especially when it comes to character development and like having hope at the end of it and that kind of thing. Because I've definitely read books that do involve the topic that felt more like, oh, we're trying to be edgy, because there's not really any resolution or like hope at the end of the book, which obviously there are definitely real life situations where that's not necessarily the case, but I don't think that's very helpful to people reading books to try to escape or to learn something new or to have enjoyment or anything like that. It just definitely feels more like a cash grab, like, oh, we're gonna be edgy, but we're not gonna do it in a very productive way. So this book didn't feel like that, thankfully, and that was definitely my main issue that I did take with the book. Otherwise, I did overall enjoy it, and I do think I would probably read it again in a few years. If anybody has any interest in checking the book out for yourself, I will leave links below to the publisher and the author. If anybody would like a review of the sequel, please let me know in the comments below, as well as any other book suggestions you may have for me to review and discuss in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.